In July 1518, on the narrow cobblestone streets of Strasbourg, an extraordinary event was about to unfold. A woman named Frau Trophia stepped outside her home one summer morning and began to dance. At first, it seemed like a private act of joyful spontaneity, the kind of bold freedom that might bring smiles to passers-by. But Trophia's movements were anything but light-hearted. She twirled and stamped in place under the scorching sun, her face growing glossy with sweat in the fierce summer heat. With each step, her dance grew wilder and more frantic. Hours passed, and still she did not stop. By nightfall, she collapsed in sheer exhaustion on the cobbles. Everyone in the city surely thought the nightmare was over, until dawn. In the early morning mist of the next day, as silence still hung over the sleeping city, Trophia rose and resumed dancing. Her feverish dance began anew, as if some unknown force had reclaimed her body. Her eyes were blank. When she moved, it was without purpose or joy. Townspeople gathered in the street in growing alarm. For a full week she danced, barely pausing, until her bare feet were swollen, blistered, and bloody. Sweat and blood slicked the cobbles beneath her, yet she seemed oblivious to the pain. Day turned into night and back into day again. Each time she collapsed, she soon got back up and continued. No one could explain what was happening. By the end of that first week, the strange mania had spread. One by one, other residents began to dance. It started with a few onlookers who, having watched Trophia spin and sway for hours, found themselves compelled to imitate her. A tailor, a baker's apprentice, even a beggar. Suddenly, each discovered they could not resist the music in their heads. They joined Trophia in the narrow alleys and open squares, their arms flung wide, legs marching like soldiers. Neighbors gawked and whispered in astonishment and fear. Word of the bizarre outbreak fanned out through the town. By late July, more than 30 people were dancing together each morning in the town square. Men and women of all ages were caught up: hawkers, porters, pilgrims, even priests and nuns. No one understood why, but each felt forced to move. As July wore on, the dancing fever intensified. The number of dancers swelled each day, as if the air itself were contagious. The clang of shoes on stone and the steady rhythm of drums became the city's new soundtrack. Dust from the surrounding fields settled on their shoulders. The midday sun turned the air a dusty orange, thick with the acrid smell of sweat and fear. Onlookers stood back in stunned horror, afraid that even a stray breath of this frenzy might infect them. By mid-August, perhaps 400 people were caught in the madness. In grim resolve, officials decided to lean into the frenzy. They transformed the city into one giant dance hall. In the town's horse market, carpenters quickly erected a wooden stage about 20 feet across. The grain market was cleared to serve as a makeshift dance floor. The council hired dozens of drummers, fiddlers, and pipers to play from dawn to dusk, their ceaseless music urging the dancers on. They even brought in strongmen to prop up those who stumbled. This spectacle, meant to break the curse, only fueled the frenzy. People forgot to eat or drink, and some literally danced to the point of collapse. An eyewitness poem later recorded that dancers dropped like leaves in St. Martin's Square. They fell down unconscious and died. According to later accounts, as many as 15 people a day died at the height of the plague, though official records are fragmentary. The terrified council realized their experiment had failed. On September 1st, they lifted the drummers' hammers and banned all public dancing and music. The churches opened their doors for prayer instead of processionals. Meanwhile, the remaining afflicted were gathered as carefully as soldiers and loaded into wagons for a pilgrimage of desperation. It was a slow, 3-day journey of roughly 30 miles to a mountain shrine of St. Vitus near Saverne. The procession wound through densely wooded hills, each wagon accompanied by murmured prayer. Inside the wagons, the afflicted either shook as if still dancing or lay weakly sleeping, their bodies racked by fever. The clatter of wooden wheels seemed to echo the rhythm still playing in their heads. Some danced in fits and starts on the journey, and by the time they arrived at Saverne, Many could barely stand, yet they still tried. At the Grotto Chapel of St. Vitus, a solemn ritual unfolded. For the faithful, St. Vitus was known as the protector of dancers and those with nervous disorders, so the town pinned its hopes on him. Under torchlight and incense, priests performed rites that seemed as ancient as the stones. They placed small wooden crosses in the hands of each dancer. Red felt shoes were put on their feet, a symbol of devotion, and consecrated oil was painted in crosses on the soles. Holy water was sprinkled over the dancers and over the carved statue of St. Vitus itself. Villagers knelt and whispered prayers while the afflicted, still trembling from weeks of frenzy, clung to each other for support. One last time, the priest led the dancers in a circle of fervent movement. Then, one by one, the dancers finally stopped. The compulsion lifted as suddenly as it had come. Those who remained were weak but alive, their feet blackened and torn from the relentless pounding. At last, the city was still. The tale of 1518 could easily sound like a fairy tale or a medieval myth, but it is not fiction. It is documented in city council records, personal diaries, and even sermons of the time. Historians count 6 different contemporary accounts that describe the event. Survivors later spoke of their ordeal, and even art of the era echoes it. Pieter Bruegel the Elder's paintings, for example, show villagers caught in trance-like dances under ominous skies. And chroniclers of Strasbourg gave the episode a name, the Dancing Plague of 1518. In fact, Strasbourg was not alone in its ordeal. Similar dance plagues had flared up across medieval Europe. The most famous earlier case was in 1374, when hundreds of people in a Rhineland town suddenly began dancing without pause, much like Trofea's followers decades later. Smaller outbreaks were noted along the Rhine and in parts of the Low Countries as well. These historical precedents suggest that in those hard times, communities sometimes turned to dance in a frenzy of shared despair. The people of Strasbourg, like those before them, may have felt powerless, and so they moved as one. Over the centuries, scholars have offered countless theories. Many medieval observers insisted it was divine punishment or demonic possession. A furious sermon might claim the city had sinned and was being disciplined. In the 20th century, academics proposed a toxicological angle. Perhaps the dancers had eaten rye bread laced with ergot fungus, a mold that produces LSD-like poisons. Ergotism can cause muscle spasms and hallucinations. After a damp harvest season, one can imagine an entire village eating infected grain. Such a theory has a certain appeal, but it still cannot explain every detail of the event. Most scholars today lean toward a psychological explanation: mass psychogenic illness, once called mass hysteria. In simple terms, it means a group of people all develop similar symptoms because their minds are linked by fear or stress. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city burdened by hardship. For years, crop failures had brought famine. Outbreaks of plague and other diseases had sickened or killed many. Wars and revolts loomed on the horizon, and comets and strange portents in the sky convinced people that the world was out of balance. In such a state, any peculiar behavior could spread from person to person like an infectious disease. This theory gains strength when we note who the dancers were. Most were ordinary workers, peasants, artisans, often women and children. These were people already living on the edge. Their days were filled with toil, their minds steeped in pious ritual and folklore. In calmer times, communal dancing was a natural part of village life, part of festivals and church celebrations. Here, however, dancing became involuntary and fear-laden. In effect, the dance was a drastic way to release and embody suffering, an involuntary expression for emotions that could not be voiced. In truth, no single reason has been pinned down by historians. The event still has an air of mystery. We have all these pieces: famine, ergot, mass hysteria, the curse of St. Vitus, but no one theory checks every box. Some modern experts even speculate about an unknown pathogen or strange toxin that no one realized at the time. Others think it was simply a tragic coincidence of circumstances. What matters is this: it was real, it happened to real people, and it cannot be easily explained. Hundreds of people danced day and night through scorching summer days, collapsing from exhaustion, and in many cases, dying from sheer overexertion. It lasted about 6 weeks before slowly dying out. In the end, Strasbourg's people survived. They buried their dead and returned to daily life in a city that had witnessed something extraordinary. But if you walk through the old town today, you might notice a quiet plaque or a whisper of history about that summer dance. It stands as a haunting reminder. When fear and folklore and the frailty of the human mind collide, an entire community can be swept away. The cobblestones still lie where the dancers once spun, and somewhere in the echoes of history, their weary feet can still be heard, echoing faintly down the empty streets. For historians and storytellers alike, the dancing plague of 1518 stand as one of history's strangest chapters, a cautionary tale about the mysterious bonds of fear, faith, and the human mind. The dust has settled in Strasbourg, but history's pulse never truly stops. Keep the rhythm with us before the next secret fades back into the silence. Veil Origins. Impossible Truths.